When you live in the city, or various cities, as I have done, you have various things that distract your attention from the miracle that is spreading all over the earth when the spring comes. Do such things happen every spring, or is it just something that is unblinding my eyes? Maybe I have really caught that rosy hue habit from Roxanne. But the apple trees this week have been almost too much for me. There are great, gnarly, old apple trees in every spare corner of Birdsville, where you wouldn't even expect a tree to be. And ever since I have been in this town, I have been finding a new one, stretching out its crooked old arms to me, as if to welcome me, or bar my path. There was one that grows half in and half out of Judge Luttrell's yard, so the fence has to consider it a kind of post and stop at it to begin again on the other side, while three of them are trying to completely close up the door of the courthouse on the public square. All the streets are bordered with them, set along at ragged intervals with the tall old maples, and all the gardens and yards have regiments of them kept about the doors and walks. 3 nights ago I went to sleep in a nice, orderly old town, and I awoke the next morning in the middle of a great white and pink and green bouquet, which must smell up at least to the first of the 7 heavens, which is buzzing so with bees that it sounds like an orchestra getting ready to burst out into some kind of a new, great hymn. And everybody in Birdsville is buzzing around in a chorus with bees, cleaning house and going visiting and shopping at the stores down on the square. I am as industriously doing likewise as I can, and have bought things from almost everybody, until my brain is feeble from trying to think up things to ask for in the different stores. All the things I could buy if Roxanne would just let me. One trouble is, there are no really poor people in Birdsville, and those on the verge of it are taken care of by the different church societies, which look after them so carefully that they come very near stepping on each other's toes. The incident of old Mr. and Mrs. Satterwhite came near being a case in point. Mr. Satterwhite has always been a Presbyterian, and Mrs. Satterwhite disagrees with her husband seriously enough to be a Methodist. They have no children and have been getting poorer and poorer, though keeping both honest and good, except for their religious differences. When the cold weather came this winter, they had no coal to keep their respective rheumatisms warm, and they nearly froze to death arguing about which one of their respective church societies they should ask help from. And when they are both chattering cold, they compromised on asking both. Then they got 2 loads of coal, which was more than they needed, and which offended both societies, so that when they asked for some kindling to light the fire with, both societies said let the other one send it. They had to sit up all night by turn for the rest of the winter to keep the fire, for fear it would go out while they were asleep. Roxanne and I were terribly distressed that such a hard thing as being night watchmen should happen to those old people. But the idol said it was just as well that one should sleep while the other watched, so that they wouldn't have any mutual time to discuss religion. That was a very practical view for a genius to take of the question, and I was surprised at him. And while the situation looks very bad for churches to get into, it has been fortunate for me. I have been able to buy a lot of things at all the stores for them, because I am an Episcopalian, and just one girl can't be considered a church society. I am the only one of my kind in town. Roxanne has helped me, and we have bought with discretion as well as liberality, I think. After we had bought all the groceries Uncle Pompey could suggest to us, and quantities as large as would go into all the corners of the kitchen for the Satterwhites' little cottage, we began to make the house as beautiful as we thought those good old people deserved. never having had anything beautiful in all their lives before. First, we put the most expensive paper on the walls, because we found that the largest flowered paper was what we needed, and it happened to be a special kind that the paper man had to order by telegram to be sent by express, for neither we nor those old people who are approaching the ends of their lives could afford to wait. It looked lovely when it was all on, and it matched the velvet carpets, which also had big flowers, good and gay. Of course, both Roxanne and I know better than to choose plush furniture, but that was what Mrs. Satterwhite wanted, and they were going to live in the cottage, not us. Father was pleased when I told him what a big bill there would be at the furniture man's, and said, "Good for you, Phil. I didn't think you could do so well as that." It took nearly 2 weeks of all our spare time, with Mamie Sue when she could escape Belle, helping and Tony occasionally, to get the Satterwhites settled in their luxury. And then I decided to ask them both seriously and separately if there was another desire of their hearts left ungratified. "Well," said Mr. Satterwhite, as he stretched his feet in his new velvet slippers that matched the carpet in that room, "I'd like a nice new Methody hymn book to be put on the table for the old lady to read out'n on Sunday evenings." It was a glorious thing to think that Father's money, ill-gotten as it is, could settle the church society quarrel. And I was so delighted that I am afraid I showed excitement when I went into the kitchen to ask Mrs. Satterwhite what she would like best now that the needs were all satisfied. "Miss Phyllis, child, there is only one thing on earth that I can think of to want. I would like to have a year's subscription to the Presbyterian Observer to read to Pa on Sunday nights, like I used to do when we was young and strong and working enough to afford the $2. Remember, Leather Louise, he is the Presbyterian and she is the Methodist, so this was permanent reconciliation. My emotions are such that I can't write further about this incident, but I wish I could picture Father's face when I told him about it, though still he wasn't satisfied and said spend some more. How could I, in a place where everybody had what they wanted, and money is not needed to make them enjoy life? My trouble was serious, and I have had to confess to Roxanne about it. I wish I could give all the boys and girls in class a nice present for some reason I haven't got, I said wistfully. To Belle especially, for she has been so pleasantly not unpleasant to me for the last 2 weeks. Yes, it is a pity, if you had to spend all that money in getting other people what they want, that you can't get Belle's permanent pleasantness. It is something that would do us all good, answered Roxanne, with the sympathy that I always find in her. Friendship that you have to buy would not be very valuable, generally speaking, I answered, as I shook my brain for a plan. But on the other hand, I continued, some people can see friendship in the form of a present when they can't feel it from the heart. Belle is that kind, and that's not my fault. What I want to find is a tie to bind her, speaking hymnally. Yes, you are right, Phyllis, answered Roxanne thoughtfully, as she and I both began to sew some little handmade tucks that are to trim the waist of the lovely blue muslin that Roxanne bought for herself, to our great joy. I do wish we could think up something that would make Belle understand how you appreciate her. But just there the idol came and stood in the door with Loveless Peyton on his shoulders, whom he let slide down him to the floor. Now a month ago I would rather have had anything happen to me than to sit in the presence of Mr. Douglas Bird. But all that reverential awe has gone, changed, the awe gone, and only reverence left. As we feared, he has bought the new spring clothes, but we see no alarming signs of affection toward Helen Kirby yet developing by them. How magnificent he is in them is beyond my pen to describe to you, Louise. What has Miss Belle done that needs an expression of appreciation on just this particular day of May? he asked with that delightful interest he always shows in all of us, Roxanne's friends. And well, it is trying in a way to girls whose dresses are still just at their shoe tops to be called Miss. We never resent it from him, because it denotes real respect, and not teasing like it does from some of our friends and older relations. It is a very thin line that separates ridicule from affectionate interest in girls of our age, but he is always on the right side. The reason Phyllis wants to do something nice for Belle is that she has the kind of disposition that requires more to make her a friend than the rest of us. It has to be something that will shock her into seeing how fond of her Phyllis is. Roxanne's explanation was so well expressed that the idol saw the point and reasoned immediately. You want to throw a kind of bombshell friendship into the camp of her prejudices, Miss Phyllis? He said, with his mouth twitching with a laugh, as if he didn't know whether we would like it or not. Yes, that is just what I want, an explosion, and I can't think of anything but a gold bracelet or ring, neither of which is a skyrocket, I answered with the flow of wit that always comes in the presence of the idol, and which, I am sure, is just a reflection of his genius. I know an explode that I can get you, Philly, said Lovelace Peyton, looking up from the bottle he was trying to get into his apron pocket, his attention having been caught by the word that interested his scientific mind. Not the kind Miss Phyllis wants, Bug Doctor, the idol answered with a laugh as he filled his bag with tobacco that he keeps in a queer old jar which the Douglas grandfathers brought from England before the Revolution. I can get us blowed that Philly wants, answered Lovelace Peyton indignantly. Philly always wants what I get her, even squirms. Don't you, Philly? Yes, I do, I answered quickly, for I can't even write how precious to me is the way Lovelace Peyton treats me with confidence. He comes to me now just as he goes to Roxanne for things he wants, strings or sympathy, and I keep a supply of both on hand for him. And when he brings dreadful bugs and things, I never let my heart quake. That is, so he will notice. A woolly caterpillar was the last test that I stood for him. I think, however, said the idol as he prepared to go on back to the office, since he had only come up to the courthouse on an errand about something. I think if I were you, Miss Phyllis, I would try a quiet little gold bracelet. Believe me, it will work. You have to consider the source of advice like you do that of the water you drink, and then act accordingly. If Mr. Douglas Berg advised me to buy one of my friends a gold bracelet, I ought not to hesitate any longer than it takes to put on a hat and get my pocketbook. Besides, I hadn't got a single thing from Mr. Snyder, who keeps the jewelry shop, and the cigar stand at the same time in the same shop. He was very cordial and glad to see Roxanne and me, and tried to stretch out the attractiveness of his few jewels in a most surprising way. He had 2 gold bracelets in stock, one plain and the other with a red set in it that he thought was a ruby, but I knew it to be a garnet. The plain one was really lovely, but I knew the other would suit Belle better. When Roxanne tried on the plain one, her lovely dark eyes just sparkled, and I could see how she loved it. But I had had my experience with the bird's pride, and I didn't even offer it to her. My self-denial brought its reward. There were 2 little beauty pins, just alike, with small pearls set along the bar. I bought them both. First I pinned one on the tie of my midi, and then, with stern determination, I handed one to Roxanne. She looked at me doubtful, then blushed and pinned hers in exactly the same spot on the collar of her midi, which had been made to match mine since the temporary easing of their financial strain. If she had defied me, I don't know what I should have done, but I gave her a squeeze that was the most graceful one I have ever accomplished since I have commenced to practice demonstrations. No hero or ambassador ever felt so proud of a decoration on his own chest as I did of that pin on Roxanne's. It is a triumph for one person to be able to make friends despite another's haughtiness, and I felt that even the old portrait grandmother would have been glad to have Roxanne make me so happy. Then I had an addition to my first plan. Ideas have a way of splitting off and multiplying themselves, like jellyfish do in the natural history, if they are in favorable environment. I asked Mr. Snyder to set all the jewelry trays upon the counter again, and beginning at the first one, I bought a nice token of my regard for all 11 of my class at the Bird Academy. "Now, Roxanne," I said as I left the store, "I know that this action of mine looks very vulgarly rich, and if anybody did it to me, I would be as mad as Tony and all the rest will be if I offered them this jewelry without an explanation. But Mr. Snyder and the 7 children he has are enough to excuse any amount of vulgarity. Cigars and jewelry are very little for that large family to thrive on, and that was $45 I spent. I should think my friends would sympathize with me in having to get rid of this money in a sensible and charitable way, enough to take the tokens without any indignation when I explained it to them. Don't you think so?" "Oh, Phyllis," said Roxanne, with the affection in her voice that I hope I am never going to get accustomed to. "Nobody would refuse to do just like you want them to, and if they thought they could, you would make them see that it would be mean to do it. They will all be delighted with the presents. Can't you see Mamie Sue turning that ring around and around on her finger?" I had bought a ring with a lovely green set in it for Mamie Sue, in memory of the many horsehair ones she has had to wear to piece out her memory, which must be fat and lazy like she is herself. I am going to make my presentation apologies to them all tomorrow, while we eat lunch out on the flat rock in the academy yard. Sometimes we take a double lunch and invite the boys to come over and share it with us. Roxanne and I have planned to do this. She is going to let Uncle Pompey make one of his favorites for us. She is still indulging him in cooking materials, but thinks she will have to begin to starve again on June 1st. The new invention has got as far as needing some chemicals already, but it is best to climb away from an evil day upon the ever-convenient rosy cloud, and that is what we did as we walked along toward home. But a strange thing happened, and funny too. I am blushing over my awkwardness, even as I write just to you, Leather Louise. But isn't it enough to make me blush to think of that scarf pin with the moonstone and pearl in it that I got to give Pink sticking in the idol's necktie, if he hasn't already taken it off to go to bed? This is how it happened. As we came along the street, almost as far as to Miss Priscilla's, we met Tony and Mr. Douglas Bird coming into town. I never saw 2 people as much excited as they both were, and when they saw us they stopped talking and looked at us like we were a surprise to them. For a minute I was startled, for I thought I heard Mr. Rogers' name spoken excitedly by Tony, and I have never gotten over that uneasiness about him, though the great secret robbery is a thing of 2 weeks past. I can't help anxiously wondering what they were talking about. They stopped, and so did we, and of course Tony's scout eyes landed right on those twin pins Roxanne and I were wearing. And before I could stop her, Roxanne had told him about the present luncheon out on the flat rock tomorrow, and Snyder, and how I had to spend money. I thought Tony was going to laugh and joke about it, as his former conduct would have been, but he got red in the face, shook as I put his pin into the lapel of his coat, and spoke to me as if I were ill and needed sympathy, like he has been doing for a week. That was upsetting enough, but when the idol looked at me with real affection beaming from his glorious eyes and said, "Don't I get a jewel too, Miss Phyllis?" I almost doubled up into a heap on the pavement, and it was Roxanne who came to my rescue and held all of them out for him to take his choice. He took the one I would rather have him take, a beautiful pearl, like my friendship is for him, shadowed by the moonstone, which is my unworthiness. I'll go down early in the morning and get another pin for pink. I wish Father was here, so I could tell him about Mr. Snyder, and how glad he was to get the money. Tainted money were the words the magazine used. Wouldn't feeding hungry little children take the taint off the money and the people who gave it? I believe so. I wish I had all Father's money to give away, and he had to work for all we get, at something like being a lawyer or a doctor. This had been a lovely day, and I am thankful for my happiness. Good night. Oh, why aren't people more careful about what they say before children, who can't always understand all that things mean? I will never forgive myself for bringing this awful thing down on Roxanne and her family as long as I live. Though Mr. Douglas Bird says it was not my fault at all. He was the one who called the present for Miss Bell an explosion, and so put the idea into Lovelace Peyton's mind. Nobody knows yet just exactly what did happen, or how bad his eyes are hurt, but the light of all the world is going out for me. If Lovelace Peyton is going blind, so he never can be the famous doctor he was born to be. Old Uncle Pompey has been gasping with asthma in the kitchen since morning, and all he can tell is that Lovelace Peyton had taken some kerosene out of the can on the back porch. He thought to just mix with onions and other things he often uses to make medicines. Suddenly he heard an explosion in the backyard and ran out to find Lovelace Peyton's face all burned and him insensible. When Roxanne got to him, he just moaned that he was making an explosion for me, and then the doctor gave him something to keep him from suffering with the burn while he dressed it. They can't tell about the eyes as yet. Miss Prissy is with Roxanne, and they won't let me stay all night, so I had to come home. Roxanne just won't believe that he won't get all right. Neither will Mr. Douglas Bird. He was lovelier than ever to me, but with that same kind of flavor in his kindness that he and Tony both had yesterday. What can they be pitying me about? Father has been away a week, and I am so sorry. I have just written to him about the accident, and I know he will be distressed, for he was as fond of Lovelace as of anybody he knew. I believe he'll come right home. How can I go to sleep and wait until morning to know if those lovely blue little boy eyes will never look up at me again? What can I do to ease this awful anxiety? As if I didn't know what to do when I have heard so often about a person who watches every sparrow's